Welcome to ePathshala. I am Dr. Vishal Jadhav, Associate Professor, Department of Sociology, Tilak Maharashtra Vidyapeeth, Pune. Today we are going to look at a module titled Class and Informal Sector, Caste, Production, Relations in India. This particular module comes under the paper Classical Sociological Theory. What is the informal sector? It is estimated that almost 93% of the Indian economy constitutes the unorganized or the informal sector. What does this mean? What are the class relations and what are the relations in terms of means and mode of production in this particular situation? What is the relationship between caste and occupation in such a scenario? This particular module will try and understand this particular facet of class relations and caste relations to production and consumption in Indian economy. The module on class and informal sector would highlight the elusive nature of class, and especially so in terms of how it is understood, not only through the production matrix but also now through the consumption variables. Moreover, how does the informal sector in India question and also support some of these Weberian and Marxist understandings? There exists a vast literature of the definition of class with different thinkers and schools of sociological thought elucidating different characteristics of class. This then makes it an arduous task to incorporate in a single term all the elements appearing in different versions, which therefore eludes the understanding of many. However, to arrive at some form of discernment, Weber's interpretation of class as a basic form of stratification in society remains crucial. And this module will therefore begin with the analysis of Weber's notion of class, which when applied to the Indian context of informal sector ensues a constant debate both in support and dissension. However, to comprehend Weber one needs to draw primarily from Marx, his idea of class as the basis of social stratification, as it is a Marxian notion of class in which Weberian understanding is found deeply rooted and constantly in contestation. So herein the model will draw both an analogy as well as highlight the differences between both, and then it will move on to contextualize the concept in the Indian situation. Weber on class. Historically, Weber first developed his theory of emergence of class between 1911 and 1920 while writing Economy and Society. The term class refers to any group of people who have the same typical chance for a supply of good, external living conditions and personal life experiences. The basic condition of class lay in the unequal distribution of economic power and hence the unequal distribution of opportunity. Weber defines class as designating individuals on the basis of opportunities they may or not have for asserting their interests on the market. Weber expounds that the basic fact determining the class of an individual is control over property. To be precise, property differences generate classes and therefore the locus of class is economic interest. However, to comprehend class as a category, it is indispensable to draw a comparison between Marxian understanding of class and that of Weber. No understanding of Weber's theory of class is possible without first considering Marx's take on class, antagonism and class conflict. Marx and Weber, a comparison. To begin with, Marx located class in production relationships existing in a production system, stressing that class dichotomy arises between those who owned means of production, capital, against those who did not. Class, therefore, is any aggregate of people playing some part in the production mechanism. On the contrary, Weber advocates that class is a market situation and class relationships are ones between the employers and the employees, manager and worker, and not the owner or the possessor of the labor power. Class situation implies a market situation, and hence it means the typical probability of procuring goods, gaining a position in life, and finding inner satisfaction, one derived from relative control over goods and skills and from the income producing uses within a given economic order. The market situation of any object is defined as all the opportunities of exchanging it for money which are known to the participants in exchange relations and aid their orientation in the competitive price struggle. This is to say that those who share the same market or class situations are subject to similar economic exigencies which usually influence both the material standards of their existence and what sorts of personal life experiences they are able to enjoy. A class denotes an aggregate of individuals who thus share the same class situation. In these terms, those who did not own property but can only offer services on the market are divided according to the services they have to offer. Likewise, those who own property and are differentiated according to what kind of property they own and how they use it to meet economic ends. Weber therefore agrees with Marx that ownership versus non-ownership of property is the most important basis of class division in competitive market. For Weber, class is a modern phenomena stemming and emerging from the rise of the market economy or market capitalism. Before market capitalism, allegiance to a group was merely based not on class but on status, which again is based on distribution of honor. The concept of class consciousness, class situation versus status situation. Weber's conception on class, as heavily drawn from Marx, did give some importance to class consciousness, which occupied a centrality in Marxian theory. For Marx, a class could realize its interest once it became conscious of itself as a group. However, Weber differed in the sense that class consciousness was not elementary to a group's existence as a class. Instead, he posits the term status as a position in society determined by social estimation of honor, not economic power, and it is this category which appears to be class consciousness. And in contrast to class situation, status situation is defined by strict separation from the economic order, that is, the sphere of the market. Whereas class situation is characterized by life chances and patterns of acquisitions and income, status groups is simply a social grouping outside the market characterized by patterns of consumption, the pursuit of lifestyles and habits of taste. The status situation has to do with the specific choices and lifestyle selections which individuals and groups make in surrounding themselves with furnitures, cars, as well as status qualifications that are made in selecting types of entertainment, leisure activities they may become involved in. And consumption is not entirely an individual matter, but has social aspects to it. There is an element of selection in consumption, and this criteria then preconditions the selection of lifestyle of a group. For instance, Weber points out in the 19th century, Prussian army officers cultivated dueling qualifications by obtaining facial scars for purposes of making claims to lifestyles that denoted status in terms of social honor and military rank. While social class is stratified in relation to pursuit of opportunities and incomes and life chances of acquisition, activity concerning status groups restricted to selections and choices related to organizing lifestyles and putting a forward claim to social honor. Having deciphered the key concepts in Weber's theory of class, the module would now attempt contextualizing it in Indian context of informal sector, which constitutes a harrowing 90% of employment in India according to evidences on the issues of coming reports based on the periodic employment and unemployment surveys conducted by the National Sample Survey Organization, which suggests that only a small share of employment is in the organized sector so defined. More than 90% of workforce and about 50% of the national products are accounted for by the informal economy. The most recent is the just released report on the informal sector and conditions of employment in India. Based on the employment and unemployment survey conducted in the 68th round of the NSS during July 2011 to July 2012, the NSS adopts a definition of the informal sector, which in the case of manufacturing is very different from the residual sector excluded from the statutory definition of the organized manufacturing sector. The report identifies the formal sector as consisting of proprietary and partnership enterprises, excluding those run by non-corporate entities such as cooperatives, trusts, and non-profit institutions in the non-agricultural sector and in agricultural related activities excluding crop production. The terms unorganized and informal sectors are often used interchangeably. The informal sector may be broadly characterized as consisting of units engaged in the production of goods or services with the primary objective of generating employment and incomes to the persons concerned. These units typically operate at a low level of organization with little or no division between labor and capital as factors of production and on a small scale. Labor relations, where they exist, are based mostly on casual employment, kinship, or personal and social relations rather than contractual arrangements with formal guarantees. Thus, the class of activities that comprise the informal economy is vast and offers a unique instance of how social forces affect the organization of economic transaction. It becomes important to highlight the paradoxical nature of the informal economy and the way in which social forces determine its onset and development. We need to comprehend how these activities interact with the social structures existing in a particular society, and it is in these interactions that the paradox surfaces, thus necessitating discernment of the underpinnings of the informal economy, its ambiguous relationship with state regulation, its functionality for economic and political institution that it supposedly undermines, and most importantly, its elusiveness. The Indian experience. To start with the Indian experience, it has multi-structural economy wherein one witnesses the coexistence of pre-capitalist and capitalist production systems and was exposed to modern industry with the coming of the colonial rule. In correspondence to this, there emerged numerous modes of production, consumption and accumulation of surplus, and concomitantly thus a differentiated working class structure. This is further confounded by the presence of various local varieties. Hence, the working class is affected by caste, tribe, ethnicity, gender, and the associated patriarchy, amongst many others. But the emergence and consolidation of a class structure in India is a relatively recent phenomena, coming into being with the capitalist mode of production brought in by a colonial regime primarily. With the growth of industries, there was reorganizing of the population into different categories, and concentration of working class in the urban centers became an important factor driving the formation of the workers as a class. Similar conditions of living of the working class, shared interest in the urban setting, opened up similar life chances for all. Class as a category emerged in the Indian context in the late 19th century and somewhat bears analogy with those in other parts of the world having experienced industrialization. However, the Indian experience to a great extent should be considered different from others given the far-reaching consequences of the new production system had on the Indian labor sector, ushering in greater degree of differentiation in class formation, the configuration of classes altogether. To exemplify the situation in Europe, wherein capitalism did dispossess the traditional artisans and craftsmen, yet generated employment in the large industries. However, following the destruction of the cottage industries, growth of modern industry did not immediately take place, thus resulting in mass landlessness and disenfranchisement. This was further compounded by the de-skilling brought about due to the long time period modern industry took to either fully or partially replace the traditional industry. Thus, the traditional artists did not even have the skills and service to offer in a new capitalist market scenario. This hence placed the working class in a negatively advantaged position, perfectly fitting into the contours of Weberian understanding of class. This then subsequently gave rise to the growth of informal sector. Further, the fact that the workers, after ages of long involvement with an agrarian economy, are suddenly exposed to a modern society, fails to extract them from the long ingrained backwardness. It begins to get embedded into casteism and other forms of regressive ideas. This in turn precluded any attempt at class consciousness in spite of shared interests, thus presenting an empirical critique of Marxian understanding that shared interest determines the genesis of a class consciousness and in the initial stages of Indian experience with modern capitalist production system, a colony of the British rule. The pace of the capitalist development accelerated in the post-war period and later with the neoliberal turn, which altered the face of the Indian economy. And working class, having been exposed to much exploitation under capitalist production of the imperialist rule, came to occupy its place in the political struggle with a class consciousness. As a consequence, trade unionization ensued with the formation of All India Trade Union Congress in 1920, and large-scale protests were conducted. The simmering discontentment was rooted not only in the exploitative character of capitalism, but also the fact that such a mode of production affected the consumption patterns of the populace, dangerously reducing the purchasing and bargaining capacities. So, the Indian class situation needed to be comprehended through both the production matrix as well as the consumption variables in toto. Moving on then, after the neoliberal phase of the 90s, which aggravated the case of informalization of economy, one needs to analyze the informal sector with greater criticality. With the informal economy surging much ahead of the formal sector with an employment dividend crossing above 90%, the condition of the people employed herein is only aggravated. While formal sector provisioned growth of class consciousness with unionization, the highly scattered and widely pervasive informal sector precluded such a genesis. As mentioned earlier, India is a case of class society with different affiliations grounded in caste, tribe, gender, etc. And in addition to these differences, discrepancies in wages also further created numerous cleavages within a working class. Some were employed in the public sector enterprises, while others constitute a reserve of labor working in informal commodity production systems, petty trading, rag picking amongst others, struggling daily for the bare subsistence of wages. In addition to the wage differentials, working conditions varied. While the formal sector had better pay, job security, the condition of the workers in the informal economy worsened by the low wages, but also exacerbated by other forms of coercion surfacing in the form of patriarchal bias in employment, which deprive women thus hindering their inclusion in the economic progress and process and contributing to their impoverishment. Now, given the huge differences within the working class, one is readily bound to think that all there will be mobility from the informal to the formal sector. However, this has not been the case, as recruitment to a great extent depended on the social network stemming from one's affiliation to a particular status situation. So herein, as well as Weberian interpretation conveniently fits in. Thus, it would be entirely incorrect to affirm that one's inclusion in a work culture characteristic of a particular sector is in fact determined by the cultural and social set of behaviors expected of a given class, with an inherent way of life and estimation of honor which restricts social intercourse. To support this argument, one could refer to caste allegiances which have decisive influence in every sphere of the work sphere. For instance, there is a wage differential between the upper caste worker would get higher segment of wage than the low caste worker. Thus, the lower caste, the depressed classes, the Dalits, the Adivasis are all relegated to a position where they work for subsistence. Caste plays a crucial role in placing the workers in the labor market, but also ensures a continuing pool of social relations for the supply of various kinds of labor for capitalist mode of production. To quote, this new caste principle works both ways. It keeps the lower sections out of the higher reaches of the working class. It also ensures that those from the higher sections will not take up the demanding employment in the lower sections. Hence, placing one section in a positively advantaged class situation against the others, and therefore the prevalence of the disadvantaged working class groups, they being denied access to better life chances, wages and employment. This again substantiates the Weberian idea to a great extent. Thus, one's status affiliation evolving into a close caste group not only plays a significant role in employment, but also securing a position in the wage scale. A study from Kerala buttressed this point, established that in higher positions the upper caste workers had preponderance, while the lower caste or the Dalit Adivasis were given the dead end, low remunerated jobs. And if caste based division of labor based on qualification as education and land holding still decided one's inclusion in the labor market, thus class relationship is one between the employer and the employee and not one's mere position in the production system. In India, the category of class needs a much more nuanced deconstruction, especially in the huge informal sector, which thrusts ahead the economic growth, constituting more than 90% of the labor force. The situation in India is a complex one, made distinctive and magnified by an imposed capitalist mode of production by the colonial regime, existence of multiple production relations and consumption patterns, identified mainly by numerous status affiliations based on caste, religion, ethnicity, etc., all affected by local and international events of economic and political nature. Conclusively, only by considering these idiosyncrasies and peculiarities can the Indian class situation be aptly comprehended in the contemporary scenario, it having been historically exposed to both forced capitalism as well as state-driven neoliberalism. To conclude, we have seen that class, in terms of the Marxist understanding of class, can be applied to understanding the unorganized sector in India. This is especially true after the period of liberalization, privatization and globalization, when the Indian economy grew at an unprecedented pace. The markets today are controlling state policies, and especially after globalization, where our economy has now merged with the global economy, factors which are beyond the nation state are also affecting the policies and fortunes of the economy in the country. In this respect, therefore, it is interesting to see how when 93% of the Indian population is in the unorganized sector, what are the vagaries and what are the problems that they are facing, and what are the remedies that the state must come up with.